The wheelchair-bound man lifted his hand slowly, brushing a tear from Abigail's cheek with more tenderness than anyone had shown her in years. 7 years ago, Kang Dae-hyun whispered, his voice thick with emotion, a woman ran into a burning building to save a stranger. She gave me her grandmother's ring and told me to hold on to hope. His fingers intertwined with hers. I've been searching for that woman ever since. Abigail's breath caught in her throat. She remembered that night. The flames. The smoke. The terrified man she dragged from the wreckage. But what she didn't know was that the man she'd saved wasn't just anyone. He was the hidden king of an empire worth billions. And he was about to destroy everything and everyone who had ever hurt her. Before we dive deeper into this story, make sure you're subscribed to this channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our stories. Drop a comment below if you love mafia romance, and let's get into this dramatic tale of love, revenge, and redemption. 7 years ago, Los Angeles was supposed to be Abigail Sinclair's fresh start. At 22 years old, she had just finished her jewelry design degree and landed an internship at one of the most prestigious design houses in the city. Her grandmother, the woman who had raised her after her parents' passing, had given her a family heirloom ring as a graduation gift. This ring has been in our family for 4 generations, Grandmother Rose had said, pressing it into Abigail's palm. It's not valuable by the world's standards, but it carries the prayers of every woman who wore it before you. When you feel lost, look at it. Remember who you are. Abigail wore that ring everywhere. On the night of August 15th, she was walking past the old Majestic Theater on downtown's east side when she smelled smoke. At first, she thought it was coming from a nearby restaurant. But then she heard the screams. The building's east wing was engulfed in flames. People were running out, panicked and coughing. Fire trucks hadn't arrived yet. The chaos was overwhelming. That's when she heard him. A man's voice, weak but desperate, calling for help from a ground floor window. Every instinct told her to wait for the professionals. Every logical thought screamed that she should stay back. But something deeper pulled her forward. Abigail grabbed a discarded jacket from the ground, soaked it with water from a fire hydrant, and covered her nose and mouth. She pushed through the broken window and into the smoke-filled room. The heat was unbearable. Her eyes watered so badly she could barely see. But she followed the sound of coughing until she found him. A young Korean man, probably close to her age, was trapped beneath a fallen beam. His leg was pinned, and blood seeped from a wound on his forehead. Despite his obvious pain, his eyes widened when he saw her. "What are you doing?" he gasped. "Get out of here. I'm not leaving you." Abigail's voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. She grabbed the beam and pulled with all her strength. It didn't budge. "You can't lift it," the man said. "Please, just go." "I said I'm not leaving you." Abigail looked around frantically. She spotted a metal rod nearby and used it as a lever, positioning it under the beam. With a desperate cry, she pushed down with every ounce of strength she possessed. The beam shifted just enough. The man pulled his leg free, groaning in pain. Abigail ducked under his arm and helped him stand. Together, they stumbled toward the window. The smoke was getting thicker. Her lungs were burning. "Stay with me," she pleaded as his weight grew heavier against her. "Don't you dare give up." They made it to the window just as a section of the ceiling collapsed behind them. Abigail pushed the man out first, then tumbled after him, landing hard on the pavement outside. For a moment, they lay there, gasping for air as sirens wailed in the distance. The man turned his head to look at her. Even covered in soot and blood, there was something striking about his features. High cheekbones, dark eyes that seemed to hold depths she couldn't fathom. "Why?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Why did you risk your life for a stranger?" Abigail didn't know how to answer. Instead, she reached for the ring on her finger. She didn't know why, but something compelled her to slide it off and press it into his palm. "Hold on to hope," she said, echoing her grandmother's words. "Whatever happens, don't give up." The paramedics arrived then, rushing to attend to them. In the chaos of stretchers and oxygen masks and questions, Abigail lost sight of the man. By the time she was released from the ambulance, he was gone. She never got his name. She never got her ring back. But she never forgot him. What Abigail didn't know was that the man she saved was Kang Dae-hyun, the eldest son of the Kang dynasty. The Kangs were not a typical family. On the surface, they were the founders of Obsidian Holdings, a global conglomerate that specialized in real estate, luxury goods, and financial services. Their net worth was estimated in the hundreds of billions. They owned half of downtown Los Angeles and had business interests spanning 3 continents. But beneath the surface was something darker. The Kang family had built their empire on a foundation that stretched back 3 generations to Korea, where Dae-hyun's great-grandfather had established a network that existed in the shadows between legitimate business and organized power. They called themselves businessmen. Their enemies called them the Obsidian Syndicate. Dae-hyun had never wanted any of it. He had spent his youth rebelling against his father's expectations, studying architecture abroad, dreaming of building things rather than controlling people. But fate had other plans. The fire at the Majestic Theater was no accident. It was orchestrated by members of his own family. Dae-hyun's younger brother, Kang Min-jun, had always been jealous of their father's favoritism toward the eldest son. When their father announced that Dae-hyun would inherit control of Obsidian Holdings, Min-jun's jealousy transformed into something dangerous. He had hired men to trap Dae-hyun in that building. The fire was meant to kill him. But Abigail Sinclair had ruined everything. After she saved him, Dae-hyun was rushed to a private hospital. The injury to his leg was severe. The doctors managed to save the limb, but they told him he might never walk normally again. His father died of a heart attack 3 months later, and chaos erupted within the family. Min-jun moved quickly, spreading rumors that Dae-hyun was permanently disabled and unfit to lead. He convinced key family members and business associates that the eldest son was now a liability. He even produced falsified medical records suggesting Dae-hyun had suffered brain damage from smoke inhalation. Dae-hyun watched his birthright being stolen from him. And then he made a decision. If they wanted to believe he was weak, he would let them believe it. He would play the role of the broken man, the pitiful invalid confined to a wheelchair. But in the shadows, he would build something greater than they could imagine. He would become Mr. Obsidian. For 7 years, Dae-hyun played his role perfectly. He allowed his brother to assume control of the family's public business interests while he quietly built a shadow network of his own. Using a web of shell companies and trusted lieutenants, he established control over the most profitable aspects of Obsidian Holdings without anyone realizing it. He also searched for the woman who saved his life. But the chaos of that night had left him with little information. He knew she was African American, young, with eyes that blazed with courage. He had her ring. But he didn't have her name. His investigators searched for years without success. Meanwhile, Abigail Sinclair's life had taken a darker turn. After that night, she had tried to move forward. Her internship turned into a full-time position, and she showed genuine talent for jewelry design. Her career was on the rise. Then she met Matthew Webb. Matthew was charming in the beginning. A successful real estate developer with connections to powerful people, he had pursued Abigail with relentless attention. He sent flowers. He showed up at her workplace with grand gestures. He promised her the world. Abigail's grandmother had passed away by then, and she was desperately lonely. She mistook Matthew's obsessiveness for devotion. They married after 6 months of dating. The wedding was elegant. The honeymoon was beautiful. And then the nightmare began. Matthew's true nature emerged slowly. First came the criticism. Then the isolation. He convinced Abigail to leave her job, saying he made enough money for both of them. He moved them to a mansion outside the city, far from her friends. He monitored her phone calls and her movements. The first time he raised his hand to her, Abigail was too shocked to react. He apologized afterward, tears streaming down his face. He promised it would never happen again. It did happen again. And again. 5 years into their marriage, Abigail had become a ghost of the woman she once was. The fire that had burned in her eyes the night she saved a stranger had been extinguished. She had forgotten how to hope. Until the night everything changed. Matthew Webb was getting desperate. His real estate empire was crumbling. Bad investments and worse decisions had left him millions in debt. His creditors were circling like sharks, and he needed a massive injection of capital to survive. That's when he heard about the Obsidian Holdings private investment fund. Rumor had it that a mysterious figure known only as Mr. Obsidian was quietly buying stakes in struggling companies. The terms were generous, the requirements unclear. All Matthew knew was that he needed that money. He applied for a meeting. To his surprise, it was granted. What Matthew didn't know was that Mr. Obsidian had very specific reasons for agreeing to see him. For 7 years, Daehyun's investigators had searched for the woman who saved him. They had followed countless leads that turned into dead ends. But 6 months ago, one of his most skilled operatives had finally found a connection. A fire department report from that night listed the civilians present at the scene. One name stood out: Sinclair. Further investigation revealed that Sinclair was Abigail Sinclair, now Abigail Webb, wife of real estate developer Matthew Webb. Daehyun had his team monitor her. What they discovered made his blood boil. The surveillance footage showed Abigail flinching when her husband raised his voice. Medical records obtained through less than legal means revealed a pattern of injuries that told a horrifying story. The brilliant designer who had once run into a burning building to save a stranger was now a prisoner in her own home. Daehyun wanted to destroy Matthew Webb immediately. But he was patient. He had learned that patience was the greatest weapon. Instead, he crafted a plan. The meeting was held at the Obsidian Holdings downtown headquarters, a towering structure of black glass and steel that dominated the Los Angeles skyline. Matthew arrived with his lawyer, his arrogance barely concealing his desperation. Abigail was there too. Matthew had insisted she come. "I need to look like a family man," he had said. "Investors like that. Just sit there, smile, and don't say anything stupid." She sat in the waiting area, wearing a designer dress that covered the healing bruise on her upper arm. Her hair was pulled back in an elegant style. Her makeup was flawless. She looked perfect on the outside. On the inside, she was dying. A receptionist approached. "Mrs. Webb? Mr. Obsidian's assistant will escort you to a private waiting room while your husband conducts his meeting." Abigail blinked in surprise. This wasn't what Matthew had told her would happen. But she didn't argue. She never argued anymore. The assistant led her through a maze of corridors to an elegant room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. There were comfortable sofas, a selection of refreshments, and an impressive display of jewelry designs on the walls. Abigail's breath caught when she saw the designs. They were beautiful. Innovative. The kind of work she had once dreamed of creating. You appreciate jewelry design? A voice asked. Abigail turned. A man sat in a wheelchair near the window, partially silhouetted against the light. She hadn't noticed him when she entered. I used to design, she heard herself say. A long time ago. Used to? The man rolled his wheelchair closer. Why did you stop? Abigail opened her mouth to give the automatic response. My husband preferred that I focus on the home. But something about the man's presence made her hesitate. He moved fully into the light, and she saw his face clearly for the first time. High cheekbones. Dark eyes that seemed to hold depths she couldn't fathom. Something familiar that she couldn't quite place. Have we met before? She asked. Dae-hyun smiled, though his heart was racing. It was her. The woman who had pulled him from the flames. The woman who had given him hope when he had none. And seeing her like this, broken and diminished, filled him with a rage he could barely contain. I don't believe so, he said smoothly. I'm Kang Dae-hyun. I'm afraid I don't get out much these days. He gestured to his wheelchair. I'm sorry, Abigail said automatically. About your... Please don't be. I've had 7 years to accept it. He smiled again, warmly this time. But you never answered my question. Why did you stop designing? Something about his patience, his genuine interest, unlocked something in Abigail. My husband thought it was better if I focused on other things, she said quietly. And what do you think? Abigail was silent for a long moment. Nobody had asked her what she thought in years. I think I miss it, she finally whispered. I think I miss who I used to be. Dae-hyun nodded slowly. Sometimes, he said, we lose ourselves in the expectations of others. We become ghosts haunting our own lives. He rolled his wheelchair closer still, close enough that she could see the intensity in his eyes. But ghosts can become real again, Abigail. All it takes is someone to believe in them. She stared at him. How do you know my name? Before he could answer, the door burst open. Matthew stormed in, his face red with fury. What the hell is this? He demanded. I go in there for my meeting and find out it's been cancelled. Something about incomplete documentation. I submitted everything. His eyes fell on Dae-hyun in his wheelchair, then on Abigail standing nearby. And who are you? Matthew sneered at the wheelchair-bound man. Another one of their flunkies? What are you doing with my wife? Dae-hyun remained completely calm. I was merely keeping your wife company while you conducted your business, he said mildly. I apologize if that overstepped. Matthew laughed cruelly. Whatever. He grabbed Abigail's arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. We're leaving. Waste of time. Abigail winced at his grip but said nothing. Dae-hyun's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. Mr. Webb, he said quietly, I would be careful how you treat people. You never know who's watching. Matthew snorted. Are you threatening me? You can barely will yourself around. Mind your own business. He dragged Abigail out of the room. As they disappeared down the corridor, Dae-hyun lifted his hand and spoke into a small communication device hidden in his sleeve. Follow them. I want eyes on her at all times. And accelerate the timeline on Webb's businesses. It's time to bring him down. The story is getting intense. Make sure you like this video if you're enjoying it so far. Drop a comment telling me which character you're rooting for. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Subscribe now and hit that bell so you never miss a story. Let's continue. Over the next 2 months, Matthew Webb's life fell apart. His creditors suddenly became aggressive, demanding immediate repayment of loans. His business partners withdrew from joint ventures without explanation. Government agencies launched investigations into his dealings. His bank accounts were frozen pending review. He didn't know why. He didn't know how. He blamed everyone but himself. And as his stress increased, so did his cruelty toward Abigail. She became his punching bag for every frustration. Every failed deal. Every humiliation. She learned to move silently through the house, to anticipate his moods, to become invisible. But she was not as invisible as she thought. Daehyun's surveillance team reported everything. They documented Matthew's escalating behavior. They noted every instance of his cruelty. They created a comprehensive file that would be useful when the time came. But Daehyun couldn't wait any longer. On a cold November evening, Matthew came home in a rage. The investigation into his businesses had uncovered evidence of fraud. He was going to face charges. His career was over. He found Abigail in the kitchen, preparing dinner. "This is your fault," he snarled, grabbing a bottle from the counter. "Everything was fine before you. I should have never married a worthless woman like you." Abigail backed away slowly. "Matthew, please. Please. Please." He threw the bottle against the wall, glass shattering everywhere. "You don't get to beg anymore." He advanced on her. Abigail closed her eyes, bracing for what was coming. But the blow never landed. Instead, she heard the front door crash open. She heard multiple footsteps. She heard Matthew's surprised shout, followed by struggling sounds. When she opened her eyes, 3 men in dark suits had Matthew pinned to the ground. And walking through the door, not in a wheelchair but on his own 2 feet, was Kang Dae-hyun. What? Abigail couldn't process what she was seeing. "You can walk?" Dae-hyun's eyes met hers. There was something fierce and protective in his gaze that made her breath catch. "I've been able to walk for years," he said quietly. "The wheelchair was a disguise. A way to make my enemies underestimate me." "Who are you?" Abigail whispered. "I'm the man whose life you saved 7 years ago." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. When he opened his palm, Abigail saw a ring. Her grandmother's ring. "I've been searching for you ever since," Dae-hyun said. "I never stopped looking for the woman who gave me hope when I had none." Matthew struggled against the men holding him. "Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am? I'll have you all arrested." Dae-hyun didn't even glance at him. "Matthew Webb," he said calmly, "you are finished. In 24 hours, prosecutors will receive evidence of your fraud. Your assets will be seized. You will face criminal charges." He paused. "And if you ever come near Abigail again, if you even think about her, I will ensure that you disappear so completely that no one will ever find you." "You can't do this," Matthew screamed. Now Dae-hyun looked at him, and his gaze was cold enough to freeze the air. "I am Kang Dae-hyun, head of the Kang family and true owner of Obsidian Holdings. I have resources you cannot imagine. I have connections that reach into every level of power in this country." He smiled, and there was nothing warm about it. "I absolutely can do this." He turned back to Abigail and extended his hand. "You saved my life once," he said, his voice gentle again. "Please let me save yours. Come with me." Abigail looked at his hand. She looked at the ring in his other palm. She thought about 5 years of fear and pain and silence. And somewhere deep inside her, a spark flickered back to life. She took his hand. Dae-hyun brought Abigail to a private estate in the hills above Malibu. The property was stunning. White walls and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Gardens that seemed to stretch forever. A sense of peace and safety that Abigail hadn't felt in years. "You'll stay here as long as you need," Dae-hyun told her. "The staff are completely trustworthy. There are doctors available if you need them. Counselors too." Abigail stood in the middle of the elegant living room, overwhelmed. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you doing all this?" Dae-hyun was quiet for a moment. "When you pulled me from that fire," he finally said, "I was ready to give up. My family had betrayed me. I was injured and alone. I wanted to die in those flames." His voice dropped. "But you came for me. A stranger. You risked your life for someone you didn't know. And when you gave me your ring and told me to hold on to hope." He shook his head. "You saved more than my body that night, Abigail. You saved my soul." Abigail's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't even recognize you," she whispered. "When I saw you in that office, I had no idea." "How could you recognize me?" "I was covered in blood and soot. And I've changed a great deal in 7 years." He smiled slightly. "But I knew you the moment I saw you. I would know you anywhere." They stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of 7 years hanging between them. "What happens now?" Abigail asked. "Now you heal," Dae-hyun said. "You remember who you are. And when you're ready, if you want to, you can start designing jewelry again. Obsidian Holdings has a luxury jewelry division that would benefit from your talents." Abigail almost laughed. "You don't even know if I'm any good." "I know exactly how good you are. I've seen your early work. The pieces you created before Webb convinced you to stop." His expression was earnest. "You have extraordinary talent, Abigail. The world deserves to see it." She didn't know what to say. Nobody had believed in her for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like. The next few months were a gradual awakening. Abigail worked with counselors to process the trauma of her marriage. She took long walks on the beach. She learned to eat meals without fear and to sleep through the night without nightmares. Slowly, she began to design again. At first, her sketches were hesitant. Uncertain. Like a dancer remembering steps after years away from the stage. But as she healed, her creativity flourished. Her designs grew bolder. More innovative. She developed a signature style that combined African artistic traditions with modern elegance. Dae-hyun visited often. He never pushed, never demanded. He simply enjoyed her company, discussing everything from art to philosophy to their favorite books. Their relationship evolved naturally from gratitude to friendship to something deeper. "Tell me about your family," Abigail asked him one evening as they watched the sunset from the terrace. Dae-hyun's expression darkened slightly. "The Kang family is complicated," he said. "My father built Obsidian Holdings into what it is today. But he was ruthless. He raised us to be ruthless too." "The fire," Abigail said softly. "It wasn't an accident, was it?" "No." Dae-hyun was quiet for a moment. "My brother Min-jun arranged it. He wanted me dead so he could claim the inheritance." Abigail gasped. "Your own brother?" "The Kang family does not operate like normal families. Power is everything. Weakness is punished. When I was injured in that fire, Min-jun convinced everyone that I was no longer capable of leading." Dae-hyun's jaw tightened. "He underestimated me." The wheelchair, Abigail realized. You let him believe you were weaker than you were. I let everyone believe it. For 7 years, I've played the role of the broken heir while secretly consolidating power through shell companies and trusted allies. He turned to look at her. Everything my brother thinks he controls, I actually own. He just doesn't know it yet. Abigail absorbed this information. Why haven't you exposed him? Because I'm waiting for the right moment. Min Jun isn't acting alone. He has allies within the family. My nephew Seo Jin has been helping him. There are also external enemies who would love to see the Kang family fall. Daehyun's expression was intense. When I move against them, I need to eliminate all threats at once. Otherwise, the family will fracture, and everything my ancestors built will be destroyed. Abigail nodded slowly. When you first saw me in your office, she said, Matthew was there too. You were already planning this, weren't you? You knew who I was married to. Yes, Daehyun admitted. I found you 6 months before that meeting. I had surveillance on your home. I saw what he was doing to you. His hands clenched. I wanted to intervene immediately. But my advisors convinced me to wait. To build a case. To ensure that when I took you away from him, he would never be able to come after you. So the investigation into his businesses was my doing. Yes. Daehyun met her eyes. I don't apologize for it. He deserved to lose everything. Abigail thought about this. A part of her knew she should be disturbed by the calculated way Daehyun had destroyed her husband. But she couldn't bring herself to feel anything but relief. Matthew Webb had been a monster. And now he was gone. Thank you, she said quietly. Daehyun shook his head. Don't thank me. I only did what should have been done years ago. The real question is, what do you want to do now? Abigail looked out at the ocean, thinking. I want to work, she said finally. I want to prove to myself and everyone else that I'm more than a victim. I want to create beautiful things and build something of my own. Daehyun smiled. Then that's exactly what you'll do. 3 months later, Abigail officially joined Obsidian Luxury as a design consultant. The company was Obsidian Holdings' jewelry division, specializing in high-end pieces for elite clients. Abigail started quietly, working on small projects and proving her skills to her colleagues. It wasn't easy. Some people resented her presence. They whispered that she was only there because of her connection to Daehyun. They questioned her credentials and her talent. The worst was Victoria Chen. Victoria was the current lead designer at Obsidian Luxury, and she had enjoyed her position at the top for years. The arrival of someone with genuine talent threatened her status. She began a subtle campaign to undermine Abigail. These designs are interesting, Victoria said during a team meeting, looking at Abigail's sketches with false concern, but they're very ethnic. I'm not sure our clientele would appreciate such a niche aesthetic. Abigail kept her composure. With respect, our clientele is increasingly diverse. Research shows that customers respond positively to designs that incorporate multiple cultural influences. Victoria smiled thinly. Perhaps. But we should probably leave the final decisions to those with more experience. The friction continued for weeks. Then came the announcement that changed everything. Obsidian Holdings was launching an international jewelry design competition. Designers from around the world were invited to submit pieces for consideration. The winner would receive a major contract with the company and have their work featured in a worldwide marketing campaign. The competition was open to both external applicants and Obsidian Luxury employees. Victoria immediately declared her intention to enter. She made it clear that she expected to win. Abigail hesitated. Her confidence was still fragile. Did she really have what it took to compete at that level? It was Dae-hyun who encouraged her. You have more talent in one sketch than Victoria Chen has in her entire career, he told her. The only person who doesn't see that is you. Abigail entered the competition. For the next 2 months, she poured everything she had into her designs. She drew inspiration from her grandmother's stories, from African artistic traditions, from her own journey through darkness into light. She created a collection called Phoenix Rising. The centerpiece was a necklace that incorporated burned metal elements transformed into beautiful patterns, symbolizing how destruction can lead to renewal. It was deeply personal. It told her story without words. The day of the final presentation arrived. Victoria presented first. Her designs were technically proficient and aesthetically pleasing. The judges nodded appreciatively. Then Abigail took the stage. She had never been comfortable with public speaking. Her heart was racing as she looked out at the panel of judges and the audience of industry professionals. But then she saw Dae-hyun in the back of the room, watching her with encouraging eyes, and she found her voice. This collection is about transformation, she began. About how the worst moments of our lives can become the foundation for something beautiful. Each piece tells a story of destruction and renewal, of hope emerging from despair. She walked them through her designs, explaining the symbolism and the technical innovations she had incorporated. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, her passion evident in every word. When she finished, there was a long moment of silence. Then the applause began. Abigail won the competition. When the results were announced, Victoria Chen's face contorted with fury. But there was nothing she could do. The judge's decision was unanimous. That evening, there was a celebration at Obsidian Holdings headquarters. Champagne flowed. People congratulated Abigail on her victory. But something felt off. Victoria was moving through the crowd, talking to people with an expression that seemed far too satisfied for someone who had just lost. Abigail's instincts, honed by years of survival, told her to be cautious. The next morning, she understood why. A story appeared online accusing Abigail of plagiarism. According to anonymous sources, her winning designs had been stolen from a young designer in Seoul who had shared similar sketches in private forums months ago. The internet exploded. Comments section filled with accusations. Industry professionals who had congratulated Abigail the night before began distancing themselves. Obsidian Holdings' reputation was called into question. Abigail was devastated. I didn't steal anything, she told Dae-hyun, showing him the article. These designs came from my own experiences. My own imagination. I've never even seen those other sketches. Dae-hyun believed her immediately. This is sabotage, he said grimly. Someone manufactured this story to destroy you. He launched an investigation. Within 48 hours, his team had uncovered the truth. The stolen designs had been created after Abigail submitted her work, not before. Someone had hired a designer in Seoul to produce similar sketches with backdated timestamps. The trail led directly to Victoria Chen. But she wasn't acting alone. She had received help from someone with resources far beyond her own. Kang Min-jun. Dae-hyun's brother had discovered Abigail's connection to Dae-hyun and decided to use her to strike at his enemy. He had funded Victoria's scheme, hoping to humiliate both Abigail and Dae-hyun. What Min-jun didn't know was that he had just given Dae-hyun the excuse he needed to move against him. The confrontation happened at the Kang family estate in Beverly Hills. It was supposed to be a routine family meeting, the kind that happened quarterly to discuss business matters. All the key players were there, Min-jun and his son Seo-jin, the family elders, the board members who oversaw Obsidian Holdings. Dae-hyun arrived in his wheelchair, as always. Abigail wasn't present, but she was watching through a secure video feed at the Malibu estate. Dae-hyun had told her that he wanted her to see the truth about his family and to understand the world she was becoming part of. Min-jun began the meeting with his usual arrogance. As you all know, our company has faced some unfortunate publicity recently thanks to the plagiarism scandal in our jewelry division, he said, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. I believe this calls into question the judgment of certain individuals who were responsible for hiring the designer in question. He looked directly at Dae-hyun. Perhaps my brother should consider stepping back from any involvement in company decisions. His disability has clearly affected his judgment. The room was silent. Dae-hyun sat perfectly still in his wheelchair. You raise an interesting point, Min-jun, he said calmly. I do think there are questions of judgment that need to be addressed. He reached into his jacket and placed a folder on the table. This folder contains evidence that the plagiarism accusation was manufactured. The stolen designs were created after our designer submitted her work, not before. The timestamps were falsified. Min-jun's smile faltered slightly. That's absurd. You have no proof. I have extensive proof, including communications between Victoria Chen and a fund controlled by you, brother. Dae-hyun's voice remained even. You paid her to destroy an innocent woman's reputation in order to embarrass me. The room erupted in murmurs. Min-jun stood abruptly. This is slander. I'll have my lawyers. Your lawyers will be busy with other matters. Dae-hyun's voice cut through the noise. You see, this isn't the only evidence I have. He placed a second folder on the table. This contains a complete record of your embezzlement from Obsidian Holdings over the past 7 years. You've been siphoning money into personal accounts hidden in offshore jurisdictions. Min-jun's face went pale. And this, Dae-hyun placed a third folder, contains evidence that you orchestrated the fire at the Majestic Theater 7 years ago. The fire that was intended to kill me. The room went absolutely silent. Min-jun looked around wildly, searching for allies, but he found none. Even his son Seo-jin was backing away from him. You can't prove that, Min-jun whispered. I can. The man you hired confessed everything in exchange for immunity. It's all documented. Dae-hyun stood up from his wheelchair. The gasps were audible throughout the room. Min-jun stared at his brother's legs in disbelief. You can walk? All this time? All this time. Dae-hyun's voice was cold now. I let you believe I was weak. I let you underestimate me. And while you were playing at being the heir, I was building a network that controls every significant aspect of this family's holdings. He looked around the room at the stunned faces. I am Mr. Obsidian, the silent majority shareholder who has been making the real decisions for years. Everything you thought Min-jun controlled, I actually own. The realization dawned slowly on the assembled family members and board members. They had been outmaneuvered so completely that they hadn't even known a game was being played. Min-jun made a desperate move, lunging toward the door. He was stopped by 2 men in dark suits who seemed to materialize from nowhere. You're finished, brother, Dae-hyun said quietly. The authorities are waiting outside. You and your son will face charges for attempted murder, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Min-jun's face twisted with hatred. You think this is over? There are others who will. There are no others, Dae-hyun cut him off. Every ally you had has been neutralized. Every backup plan you made has been disrupted. I've spent 7 years preparing for this moment, Min-jun. Do you really think I left anything to chance? The authorities entered the room. Minjun and Seojin were led away in handcuffs, their protests falling on deaf ears. When they were gone, Daehyun addressed the remaining family members and board members. "Let me be clear," he said. "The Kang family will continue to operate as a legitimate business enterprise. The shadows of our past will no longer define our future. Anyone who has a problem with this new direction is free to leave. Anyone who stays will conduct themselves with integrity and honor." He paused. "Are there any questions?" There were none. The news of the Kang family restructuring made headlines for weeks. Business analysts marveled at the revelation of Mr. Obsidian's true identity. The story of the wheelchair-bound heir who had secretly been running a global empire captured the public imagination. But Abigail was more interested in a different kind of story. The plagiarism accusations against her were fully retracted. Victoria Chen was terminated from Obsidian Luxury. Abigail's designs were celebrated as the innovative, original works they were. Her Phoenix Rising collection was launched to international acclaim. And through it all, Daehyun was by her side. Their relationship had evolved gradually, from rescue to friendship to something deeper. Neither of them had rushed it. Both of them had been hurt before and needed time to trust again. But now, with the threats eliminated and their wounds healing, they finally acknowledged what had been growing between them. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when Daehyun proposed. They were at the Malibu estate, sitting on the terrace watching the sunset. Abigail was sketching a new design while Daehyun read beside her. "I have something for you," he said, setting down his book. Abigail looked up from her sketching. Daehyun reached into his pocket and pulled out a small jewelry box. Inside was her grandmother's ring, the same one she had pressed into his palm 7 years ago. But it had been transformed. The simple band now featured elegant diamond accents surrounding the original stone. It was a perfect blend of old and new, honoring the past while embracing the future. "I had our design team restore and enhance it," Daehyun said. "I hope you don't mind. I wanted to return it to you as something that represented our journey." Abigail's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the ring. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Abigail Sinclair," Daehyun said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "You saved my life when I had nothing left to live for. You showed me that kindness still exists in this world. You reminded me that hope is never truly lost." He took her hand in his. "I know our lives have been complicated. I know my family comes with dangers and obligations that I have no right to ask you to share. But I love you. I have loved you since the moment you pulled me from those flames. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that love." He slid the ring onto her finger. "Will you marry me?" Abigail looked at the ring on her hand. She looked at the man kneeling before her. She thought about everything they had survived, separately and together. And she said yes. The wedding was held at the Malibu estate, on the same terrace where Daehyun had proposed. It was an intimate affair. Close friends, trusted colleagues, a few family members who had proven their loyalty. The guest list was carefully curated because both bride and groom had learned the hard way that not everyone who smiles at you wishes you well. Abigail wore a gown she had designed herself, featuring intricate beadwork inspired by her African heritage. Her hair was styled in a stunning crown of braids. She carried flowers that had been flown in from her grandmother's garden. Daehyun waited for her at the altar, his heart full. As Abigail walked toward him, he remembered the smoke-filled room where they had first met. He remembered the determination in her eyes as she pulled him to safety. He remembered the ring she had pressed into his palm and the words she had spoken. Hold on to hope. He had held on. Through 7 years of planning and patience. Through betrayal and revelation. Through everything life had thrown at them. And now, finally, they were here. "You're beautiful," he whispered as she reached him. "You're not bad yourself," she whispered back, and her smile was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. They exchanged vows they had written themselves. Promises of partnership and protection. Commitments to honesty and support. Declarations of love that had been earned through trial and transformation. When they kissed for the first time as husband and wife, the assembled guests erupted in applause. 6 months later, Abigail launched her own jewelry line under the Obsidian luxury umbrella. It was called Sinclair Designs, and it specialized in pieces that incorporated African artistry with modern elegance. Her work was featured in major fashion publications. Celebrities wore her creations on red carpets around the world. But more important than the commercial success was the message behind her brand. Every purchase from Sinclair Designs supported scholarships for young designers from underprivileged backgrounds. Every piece told a story of hope and transformation. Every customer became part of a mission to prove that beauty could emerge from even the darkest circumstances. Dae-hyun continued to run Obsidian Holdings, but with a different philosophy than his father. The company moved away from its shadowy past, focusing on legitimate business ventures and philanthropic initiatives. He established programs to support survivors of domestic violence, inspired by Abigail's journey. He created opportunities for the overlooked and underestimated. Min-jun and Seo-jin were tried and convicted. They spent their days in a minimum security facility, stripped of their wealth and power. The threat they had posed was eliminated forever. Matthew Webb faced his own reckoning. The fraud charges resulted in a lengthy prison sentence. He lost everything he had ever owned. The man who had once controlled Abigail's every move was now just another inmate with nothing but regret. And Abigail, the woman who had once been trapped in fear and silence, had become a force to be reckoned with. She served on the board of several charitable organizations. She mentored young designers who reminded her of her younger self. She spoke openly about her experiences with domestic abuse, helping other survivors find the courage to leave their own prisons. Her grandmother's ring, now enhanced with diamonds, remained on her finger always. It reminded her of where she came from and how far she had traveled. On the first anniversary of their wedding, Abigail and Dae-hyun returned to the site of the old Majestic Theater. The building had been torn down years ago, replaced by a modern mixed-use development. But the memories remained. They stood in the courtyard, looking at the place where their lives had intersected 7 years ago. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come into that building?" Dae-hyun asked. Abigail considered the question. "I try not to think about it," she said. "The past is the past. What matters is what we do with the present." Dae-hyun nodded, pulling her close. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For saving me. Not just from the fire. For saving me from becoming the kind of man my family expected me to be." He kissed her forehead. "You showed me that there's more to life than power and revenge. You taught me how to hope again." Abigail smiled up at him. "We saved each other," she said. "That's how it works." They stood there together, two people who had found each other in the flames and emerged stronger for it. The sun was setting over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. It was the color of fire. It was the color of new beginnings. And that's where we'll end this beautiful story of survival, justice, and love. I really hope you enjoyed watching this. If you did, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves a good romance story. Drop a comment below telling me your favorite part of the story or what kind of story you want to see next. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.